I have a pile of stuff up here. I have a suitcase and a bag. How many of you have went on a vacation or a trip and you had to pack your stuff? Yeah. Is it easy to get all your stuff into one bag? Not always, is it? So if you were going to go on a trip, would you rather carry something like this or like this? All right, Shelby, here. Let me have you lift it. Come up here. I want you to just pick these up. You're Shelby. All right, if you were going to carry those for a long ways, what should you rather carry? Yeah, that one. That's right. Well, this morning, what I'm going to talk to you about just a little bit, does it matter where you're going when you pack? Does it matter, right, how long you're going for? Does it matter? Okay. Just recently at our house, we had 4 inches of snow. We woke up in the morning and it's like, what? It's like we weren't expecting that much, but we got a lot of snow. Well, if I was getting dressed in the morning, on that particular morning, what would happen if I pulled out of my closet? Let's see if I can get these out of here. What if I got dressed in the morning and I pulled out these sandals and I pulled out summer dress and I'd be like, oh, it's a little bit cold out. I think I'll put a sweater on this morning and go out. Would that be a good choice or a good protection? No, what would happen to me?
You'll freeze to death.
I freeze to death, that's right. And it might be literally. I might get frostbite. I might get hypothermia. I might lose some of my limbs if I stayed out a real long time. Or I might die. Like you said, I might freeze to death. So, what happens when it gets to be winter time? We get all these lovely things out because we live up here. So if we're going to go out and play, or we're going to go out and work, now they call these cool little things the base layer. They used to call them long johns or thermal underwear. Now they call them your base layer. So you put on these because you need something warm. When I was your age, I used to have a snowsuit. It was like this one-piece thing, and you get all bundled up, and you'd zip it up, and you'd be like, oh, and you walk out like this. And then you'd be like, I forgot to go to the bathroom. You have to run back in the house, and you'd be like, and take everything off. Well, I don't have a snowsuit anymore. So if I'm going to be out a long time, then I put on like a pair of leggings, and I put on another shirt over the top. And I'll put on a pair of jeans. So I wind up with all these layers. Then instead of my little sweater, I have to put on a winter coat. I might have to put on 2 layers of socks. I'm not going to zip that up. You have to put on your gloves. You wind up with your hat. And then you wind up with a pair of boots. Have you ever went out? And if you're getting ready to go out the door, your mom or your grandma or your papa will say, make sure that coat's zipped up. Make sure you have a pair of gloves on. Put your hat on. Get your scarf on. All these things. Do you hear that? Yeah. So it's not just my mom. It's a universal thing. So you might have to put on wool socks. All these things. So it's like, what would that have to do? Well, we are told in Ephesians. In Ephesians it says, finally, it says, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. And it gives us a list of things to put on. Well, if it was wintertime talking, they'd be like, put on your hat and your gloves and your boots and your long underwear and your, and make sure you're zipped up and snapped up and hooked up to protect us, to keep us safe. So we don't wind up getting frostbite or hypothermia or all these other things that can make us sick or die. Well, in the Bible, it talks about armor, and I looked it up, and it said armor usually weighs about 45 to 50 pounds. If you've got a full suit of armor on, you're going to be like, whoa, a little bit heavy. It says to put the truth, to gird it around your waist, so like a belt. It says a breastplate of righteousness, so to protect your heart, to protect your vitals inside. It says to have on your feet the preparation of the gospel of peace, a shield of faith, a helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit. Now, do you think those things sound very comfortable? No, sometimes walking around girded with truth doesn't always make it feel comfortable. When you're in a snowsuit and you're zipped up and you're waddling out there and you're trying to bend over, you're trying to get on a sled, sometimes it's like, oh, and you're kind of pulling and twitching, and sometimes it isn't real comfortable, but the purpose of it is to keep us safe and protected. And so God says, I want you to put these things on. And sometimes we can be like, I don't really need that part. Oh, it doesn't matter if I don't have any boots on my feet. I'll just go out and play in my tennis shoes, and then my feet get cold and wet, and then I come in and pretty soon I'm going, yeah. Well, God wants us to look in His Word and be like, let's look at what it has to say. He wants us to be safe and protected. And young ladies, this is also true for your age. Because sometimes, and I would imagine it could be quite often, and I left mine over there, but sometimes we get on our phones and we're like, oh, well, what does that say? Oh, what does that look about? Oh, maybe I could chat and talk and visit. And we lose track of time, or we get involved in things that are like, oh, here we are on the gossip chain, like, oh, what did so-and-so say? Oh, what's happening with who and who? And we're like, and that can increase even more. And sometimes we get so busy with like, oh, my face is sagging and I can't keep it. And yeah, all these things are maybe, yeah, we get so caught up in all these little things that we forget that God has a way to keep us safe. And so, young ladies, I'd encourage you to spend a little time with Jesus. Spend a little time reading. Spend a little time listening. Spend a little time outside with God's world of nature. Let's have prayer. Jesus, we are so thankful for the young ladies that are here this morning, and we ask that you would guard and watch over them. Father, be with us as the older people here, that you would guard and watch over us as well. Father, that our example to them might be something that would encourage them to have a closer walk with God. And we just love you so much. Thank you that you have offered us safety and protection. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. Somebody was shorter here. I have to readjust here, I'm sorry. Okay, did you all enjoy the video? Yeah, next Sabbath is the annual Sacrificial Offering. There's a poster in the lobby on the table on the bulletin board. Looks just like that. And what can we do? What can we give up to help others? And we all can give up something. That's definitely for sure. Today, I want to talk about missions. I don't know, growing up, do you all remember Mission Spotlight, the little slide projector? Okay, that dates me a little bit. I used to love that, and when I became old enough to press the button, I arrived, We don't do that anymore. Everything's used to be DVDs. Now it's just all on the internet. And we're going to start watching that more often. If you go on Mission 360, there's great videos of the missions and what the church is doing in the mission field. And so today we're going to talk about missions. Part of me wishes I was a missionary, to be able to go overseas. When you think of a missionary, what do you think of? Someone in the jungles or, the far east, mud huts, maybe scantily clothed natives, spears and different things like this. And that's true. There are, definitely places in the world that the missionaries of the church, that's what they encountered. Papua New Guinea, for example, that area over there definitely describes the natives. How about other types of missionaries? Not all missionaries live in mud huts or have to walk 20 miles to the church or to a group of people or a village to meet with them. Some missionaries live in nice homes, have air conditioning, drive cars. Do we all live in a home? Absolutely. We're all missionaries. We are missionaries. You may not think of it, but as soon as we say we're a Christian, we've attached the name of missionary to our name. And there's so many things we can do. We don't have to go overseas, even though that's exciting and very adventurous, to be a missionary. We can be a missionary right here. And whether you're an older person or a younger person like Bella or Cassidy, you're missionaries to the people around you. So we're going to talk a little bit about today. It isn't a plug. It isn't a lengthy appeal for the annual sacrificial offering today. But I want you to keep that in mind for next Sabbath and the importance of that. And we're going to go through briefly the mission of the church, and specifically the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In Mark 16, it talks about the Great Commission, sharing God's love around the world. Go ye and preach the gospel throughout the world. And hopefully our slides work this morning. The Adventist message, the Adventist mission. And we're going to go through some things this morning to show how great of a mission field the Seventh-day Adventist Church reaches. And if you haven't seen some of these statistics before, I was impressed when I started to get in them a little bit. These are our pioneers. This was the early Adventist church. Maybe you know someone in that old picture there. But they came together and had an idea. First, obviously, the Seventh-day Adventist movement was developed. But it was far more than just the local church. It was, how can we reach? How can we take this commission, this great commission, how can we preach it around the world? They didn't have internet, TV, phones, everything we had. They had willing bodies, and they developed a publishing house. So this group of people got together and said, how can we spread the gospel around the world? John Andrews is the official first missionary for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. There's a brass statue of him and his children at Andrews University, where I attended, and he's going. They were in movement. There is action. He actually went to Switzerland with his family. His wife had passed away already, and they started publishing materials in French, and they learned French. And his daughter, Mary, I believe her name was, became so fluent in French as a young child that the local people thought she was a French girl. And tragically, she helped her father publish tracts in French. And tragically, she passed away at a young age, I think of 17. But they were missionaries, first missionaries to Europe. Okay, that's not the jungles and so forth that we described, but that was back in 1874 as the first missionary. Gordy this morning read, I can't remember the gentleman's name, or the two guys that went to Japan. Granger and the Japanese fellow, and that was 1897, first missionaries to Japan. So the Adventist Church has a wealth of missionaries throughout the world. This gentleman here, if you don't recognize his picture, you may recognize his name, Eric B. Hare. His dates, he was born in 1894 and passed away in 1982. He was just an amazing man. He was an author, a missionary, an amazing storyteller, and he also, I didn't know this, but he was an administrator in many levels. Started in the South Pacific. Some of the titles, if you just Google him, especially if you have young children, great stories. But just some of the titles, and maybe those of you that have read some of his stories will remember these. But sweet potatoes, white bean. Okay, I hear some. How about Mr. Crooked Ears? That's always a good one. And Silver and the Snake. Yep, there's a lot of heads nodding on, and there's more. It just brought back memories of myself when I was looking at these titles here. So there's a missionary from the South Pacific, and missionaries. What do missionaries have that go overseas that maybe we don't have? Stories. When I was a young Bella's age, going to camp meeting, Martha Olson's father, Pastor Tessier, and I had to ask Martha this morning because they were missionaries, and I was like, where was that? I couldn't remember. She said East Pakistan. And Martha said she spent 8 years over there, and I didn't know this, but she speaks some local language. I don't know exactly what the language is. You could ask her this afternoon and have her speak to you. But I remember the stories that he would tell the youth in the tent. And one in particular, he had a snake skin. And I don't know, maybe I was little and it looked bigger, but it had to be 10, 15 feet long and probably this wide. So that means that snake had to be about this big around. And they'd always unfurl it, and it'd go a long way there. And that was just one of the stories he had. And so missionaries have stories, exciting stories, and Eric B. Hare was one of them. And he, being an author, put it to practice and wrote many books. How about the gift of water? I know our Sabbath school has given money to water wells. Many organizations drill water wells. Obviously, this is a picture of a little fella here getting a drink. John Thomas, who many know within the New York Conference, is in Kenya right now. He was a principal at Union Springs Academy when I was there. This was a picture that he provided on Facebook, and that is a drilling rig and support crews in northern Kenya. This was yesterday, and they're drilling a well, or going to be drilling a well. And there's 30, I think he said 32 people with that group, and like 10 trucks. They have to bring all provisions with them, from fuel, water, food, the drilling equipment, supplies, the cement, because when they're done, they will have a well, a pump, and they'll build a one-day church. And while they're there, they feed the local people as well. I didn't put other pictures up here, but if you go on his Facebook page, he's got a lot of pictures of that. Can you imagine living in that environment there? They need water, so that him along with these other groups of individuals are doing that work. I had a chance, unfortunately, I wasn't able to run that rig for them, but it got tied up in the border. So previously, this is a picture of me in my younger years in Guatemala doing some work over there with that was one of the local gentlemen that were helping us out. So no matter what you can do or what your skill set is, you can be a missionary. Maranatha International. This is a group of individuals, and many of you possibly have even gone on Maranatha trips. They're always looking for individuals to help out. They're building a church or a school or something here. You don't need any specific skills. You just need to be willing. And God will give you the skills that you need, and they're doing basic construction there. Here's another picture of guys cutting some block and laying block. Not only if you can't go overseas to be a missionary, you can be a missionary locally through Maranatha. A few years ago, one of our sister churches in Randolph had Maranatha come, and I'm not sure how many people, 20, 30, 40 people I think showed up, then spent a week or two and did a project for the Randolph Seventh-day Adventist Church. Union Springs Academy for the last several years have had Maranatha come, people from all over the world to come and do a mission project there. So given the logistics of international travel and schedules, if you can't go overseas or don't desire to go overseas but still have the mission bug, you can do something locally through an organization like Maranatha, and there's others as well. Adventist Aviation. This is an organization in Papua New Guinea, and those just some of their planes. I had to put the one picture on there with the little. It was a little grainy, but the little tribal figures in the bottom right. That's the people in Papua New Guinea. That's what the missionaries encounter. And they do such a great work of getting up into the high mountainous areas and the jungles to deliver supplies, food, provisions, pastors, whatever the need is. And the airplanes obviously do that much faster. How about our media? Remember the early pioneers? They didn't have anything like we have today. Adventist World Radio. Another great organization. I tried to find some statistics about their size. I couldn't find anything, but like the name says, Adventist World Radio, it's a global thing. I know they have a big facility in, I think, Guam out in there to reach. And Adventist World Radio, that is a radio in general, is such a great mission outreach. You take North Korea, these closed countries. The government can close the country, but they can't shut down the airwaves. And so Adventist World Radio is providing the Seventh-day Adventist message to the people in North Korea and these others closed countries. Here's just a few of the TV stations, and there's more. These are just some of the popular ones. Hope Channel is written, Breath of Life, 3BN, Amazing Facts. If you want good sermons, just go on to any of these sites, and they're very good speakers. But this are the TV ministries of the church. And here again, that's spreading the message not only on television but internet. And here again, with the internet, that crosses a lot of territories that may not have had that. When I was in Guatemala, for example, these people lived in the mud hut with the dirt floors. And when you think of that, you think of the dirt floors as being pretty dirty. But some of those homes, those dirt floors are cleaner than maybe some of our floors. They're clean. It's kind of hard to say that or think of that, but they are. And this one individual, everybody has a cell phone over there. They may not have anything else, but they have a cell phone. And this one gentleman right in the center, I didn't speak Spanish, so I couldn't talk to him, but they kind of translated for me, is in the center of his hut where he sleeps and he cooks, everything's right here, was a string with his cell phone on it. We're like, why is the cell phone hanging there? And what he would do is he would take and dial the number or get online and pull the string to put the cell phone at the top of his little hut, and he would get a signal. And then he would sit and listen to either talk to someone on the phone or listen to a sermon or something. So it's amazing what's available. I know when my son Jonas was younger, we raised a bunch of money for these little radios through ADRA, another organization that does such great work. And in places where there is no cell service or anything, these radios have hours and hours and hours of sermons and Bible studies and things on, and the batteries last forever, more or less, and they'll drop them off into villages, and missionaries have come back in years later and found that the villages are Sabbath keeping. Necessarily wouldn't call them Seventh-day Adventists yet, but they were Sabbath keepers because of this radio that somebody had dropped off for them. So the Adventist mission seems very broad when you say the Adventist mission, but when you talk about the Adventist mission, what did it say in Mark? It talks about it in Matthew, the Great Commission. Preach the gospel to the entire world. Now, this is where some of the statistics come in that I thought was interesting. I apologize. This morning when I put this up, I don't know if you can read that. My older eyes could not read that. This was as of September 30th of last year, 2020. The Seventh-day Adventist Church had a little over 92,000 churches with a total membership of almost 22 million people. So when you sit in our pew Sabbath morning and look at the people that are around, and sometimes there's not that many, think of yourself as being those few people of 22 million others worshiping at the same time. That's encouraging. It is a movement. It is not just a local church that does good work locally. It's a global movement. It's a global church. I cannot get this open here. The United Nations recognizes countries and areas of the world to be 235. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has missions in 212 of those areas. So if you take that, preach the gospel throughout the world, we're not quite there yet. We're close, real close. They use in publication work over 500 different languages. It talks, if you look down through there, it goes through, the conferences and the unions and so forth there. So the Adventist Church is preaching almost throughout the world. Schools, almost 9,500 schools with a total of enrollment of about 2 million students. So the Adventist Church has a mission, and there's a much more broader mission than just what we said here. It depends how long you want to stay here, but the healthcare, we hit, hundreds of hospitals and clinics. Many people travel throughout the world, professional healthcare workers working with people's teeth or eyes or different surgical procedures that they're able to do. There's many things that the church provides. Pathways to health. I haven't heard of that in the last couple of years, probably due to COVID, but that is where they would go into a large city like Houston, Los Angeles. I know those were two of the cities. And for, I think, a week or 10 days, they rent out the large convention centers in the city, and they provide free health care to those people in the cities. And thousands of people come for eye work or small, I'll say it easy, surgeries, but surgeries that can be done. There's different things. I think it was Men's Warehouse donated semi-loads of suits to help people, and some of the homeless had come and got cleaned up, got a suit, helped get a job. These people's lives were transformed. In the cities where that has taken place are transformed. People are just amazed that people would give up their time to help others. And that's really what missions is about. It's to preach the gospel, and to help open the door for preaching the gospel is to do like Christ did, is take care of the people's needs. At times he would preach, and he was an amazing preacher, I could only imagine, but he was always there to help the person's needs. And once the person's needs are taken care of, they're open, they're receptive to the gospel. So the Adventist mission is just that. And in the Bible, we could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about the various missionaries within the Bible. Now, the most popular missionary in the New Testament was Paul. He went on several missionary journeys. The first one to Crete, the island of Crete, and then into present-day Turkey. He traveled through there and had several encounters. His second missionary journey, he went more over into the eastern section there, and then the third over into Turkey and Greece. Now, the cities that Paul traveled on were mostly trade routes, because that's where the people lived. That was easy. He could hop on a ship and go over that way. But Paul's life was anything but easy. Okay? We'll read a statement here about that. But he had a partner on one of those journeys, Barnabas. An interesting name. I didn't realize this, but it was kind of a nickname given to him. And it really kind of means son of encouragement. Even Paul, who's a seasoned missionary, this guy was shipwrecked multiple times. He was put in prison countless times. He was stoned. He was flogged, I think he said 5 times. Flogging is bringing, many people didn't even survive a flogging. The Roman flogging, when they would whip you, the end of the whip would have several leather straps with pieces of bone or metal on it. So when it would hit you, it would tear the flesh, and many people died just of shock, the pain, or bled to death. And here, Paul went through that several times. So Paul had a rough, being a missionary for Paul wasn't an easy going. He had trials that he dealt with. But he's definitely, and if you look at Acts 13, it talks about his missionary journeys there. If you want some afternoon reading, very interesting stories here again. And if you could spend a few minutes with Paul and listen to his stories, it would be an amazing, amazing time. How about in 2 Kings, the Old Testament? A little story. It's an unnamed girl from Jerusalem, the little maid. If you remember that little story there, she was a captured slave and taken to Syria, long way from her home and family. This is a little girl, I don't know the age, but 6, 8, 10, just a young child. And here she served in the house of Naaman, who was a captain of the army of Syria. He was a high official, and she was a slave. But here she had her missionary duties. She was a representative of God to that household. He was inflicted with leprosy, a disease that was deadly in those days. If you had leprosy, it didn't matter who you were an outcast. And you were just set away. Well, he ended up with leprosy, and through her faith in God, he was cured from it. And that's another amazing story. He had to go dip in the Jordan River, which was a dirty old river. And he's like, why couldn't I dip in the cleaner rivers that I have in Syria? But the Jordan River, of all rivers, but that's what needed to be done. And when he did, he came up the last time cured of the disease. That impact of just that life of that little girl on him. And we don't know the rest of the story. Too bad Paul Harvey wasn't around with the rest of the story so we could hear. But could you imagine the impact of that gentleman's life? He had great respect for this little girl to start with, to listen to her. And then when God cured his disease, I wonder what the rest of his life was. And how many people's lives he changed just because of that one act. So it doesn't matter your age, your circumstances. You know, we think we have it pretty hard here. COVID hit and everyone's complaining. I had to stay in the house. I can't do this. I got to do this. I can't do that. People have had it a lot harder than what we've had it here. And they're still missionaries. How about Daniel? Okay. 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded Jerusalem. And what did they do? When they would invade, those armies would invade, they would take the best of the best with them. So part of who they took was Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it's interesting that we always refer to Daniel as Daniel, his Jewish name. Does anyone remember what his new name, his Babylonian name was? Belteshazzar? I always get that confused with the king Belshazzar, who came later, but Belteshazzar. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Hannah, Mishael, and Azariah. I don't know why we as people remember Daniel by his name, but the others by their other names. But here, these young men were brought before I don't say the king personally, but they were brought into the king's palace to be trained because they would assimilate these people, these bright individuals, into their society. So they would conquer other lands and they would bring the best of the best to assimilate in that which helped Babylon have such the growth and the strength and the power that they had. But they were faced with a dilemma. What do we do? They were given the king's food, which they were not accustomed to. It was foreign to them. For all standards, it probably wasn't very healthy. Yet they stood firm and said, we would like healthier food, basic food. And they were granted that request. And in turn, what happened? When they were tested, how many times smarter were they? 10. Yeah, they were healthier looking, they were stronger, they were smarter, they stood out. Very interesting, Daniel, he went on to serve the king, and he became very high in the country from a political standpoint. His three friends, their test wasn't over, nor was Daniel's. Story of Daniel in the lion den. As an old man, he was tested again about his faith in God. He was cornered. There was people that wanted him out of the ruling elite, and so they convinced the king to come up with a decree that no one could pray but only to him. And of course, Daniel would pray only to God, and he was thrown in the lion's den. In turn, God saved him, and here a great witness again Daniel had. How about his three friends, the fiery furnace? I gave a sermon about that here, several months ago, about that. Talk about a witness. The entire country was to bow down before the king. And they stood up and said, no, we are not going to bow down. We're going to stay firm. We're going to be fast in our beliefs. They could have been over. There's many things they could have done, but they stood strong. And in turn, that infuriated the king so much that he ordered their execution by throwing them into this furnace. It says the guards that threw them into the furnace perished because of the heat, but they did not. A miracle took place. It was interesting because the king, his eyes were open, because as those three stood in the furnace, it said when they exited the furnace, they didn't even, their hair wasn't singed, their ropes were gone, they didn't even smell like smoke. You can't even sit near a campfire without smelling like smoke. A little pet peeve of mine. But the guards that threw him in perished. When the king's eyes were opened, and he asked someone, didn't we throw in three individuals? And he's like, there's a fourth in there that looks like God. And we know that Jesus was in there with them. Once again, another story. I would love to talk with those guys someday. And what did you talk to Christ in there? What was your conversation for those moments in there? Amazing, amazing stories. Amazing miracles take place. As missionaries, there's amazing miracles that happen, and there's no other way to explain it other than it was a miracle. I want to read Paul's account here. And Paul was not one to boast, but he was getting cornered and accused. And this is just what he went through to show what he suffered in the name of Christ. And this is 2 Corinthians 11. And we can pick it up in verse 23. Are they servants of Christ? And he's like, I'm out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. I have worked much harder. I've been in prison more frequently. I've been flogged more severely and been exposed to death and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. They figured the 40th would kill you, so they wouldn't give you the 40th. So 5 times. I lost my place here. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move, and I've been in danger from rivers, and dangers from bandits, and dangers from my own countrymen, danger from Gentiles, foreigners, and dangers in cities, in danger in country, danger at sea, and the danger of false brothers. I've labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I've been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. What was on his mind through all that? It wasn't himself. You sure would think it would be after a lifetime of what he went through. His concern was for his churches. Who is the weak? I do not feel weak. His concern is for others. His concern was for his fellow Christians. They were a young church. At times they needed struggling. They needed encouragement. They needed to have the Barnases of the church give them encouragement. How many times do we need encouragement? We all need encouragement. We all struggle. We all trip. We fail at times. We're human. And that's not the time to sit and point fingers. It's a time to encourage and uplift and help. The Great Commission is also recorded in Matthew 24, and I want to leave you with this today. Matthew 20:28. Verses 18. And this is Jesus talking. This is titled the Great Commission. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and in the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of age. So that is the commission that he's given each one of us. And what is that commission? It's action. It says go. It doesn't say they'll come to you. It says go. We have to be active. We have to make the first step. It is our purpose as Christians to be missionaries, and we are missionaries. As we sit here in church, you might think of the local missions that we give money to. We might think of the local missions that we provide here. I see a few nods. We have a radio station locally. It gives us troubles, but guess what? When we're on the air, we're providing the good news to those who tune in. 94.1, if you're in the Jamestown area. We program good material to the people in the Jamestown area. Years past, we've had healthy cooking classes for people. It's helped change the lives of some people. How about our food pantry? I know Stacy used to give us statistics on how many people went through there. There was a lot of people that we provide food for in our area. We announced this morning our Thanksgiving baskets, the 15, 20 families that we've been providing food to families for many, many years now, several decades. That's a mission. The church is here not for us to sit Sabbath morning and feel good about ourselves. The church is here to take care of people. It is our duty. It is our mission. And so I want to leave that with you today in the annual sacrificial offering. A little plug for that, again, coming up next Sabbath, is 100% of those funds, it doesn't go to administration, anything like that. 100% of those funds goes to church plants. And there was a statistic, I'm not sure if I wrote it down, a couple years ago, it wasn't a current, a new church was planted every 3.62 hours. That's pretty amazing. I'm not sure what it is today, but the only way that happens is with money to help provide the material, to help provide the funds to make that happen. We may not think that things are happening within the Seventh-day Adventist Church locally. We might think that we're stagnant. We look around and our pews are kind of slim. We look around and there isn't an Adventist church on every corner. But when you look at the global statistics, when you look at almost 22 million Seventh-day Adventists are meeting right now, more or less, depending on the time zones, but are meeting on Sabbath. The missions, the missionaries, we urge you to support those missions and the missionaries. And so next Sabbath, if you choose to support, you can support the missions all year long, and many people do. But it's the appeal for next Sabbath specifically is as they're asking, what could we sacrifice out of our lives? There's many things that we could give up for this next week and give that money instead to missions. Back in the 20s, the Adventist Church was faced with a dilemma. They didn't have money, and this is where this started, the sacrificial offering. This isn't something new that the church has developed to try to raise funds. They were ready to bring their missionaries home because they didn't have the money. And they came together and prayed about it and developed the annual sacrificial offering. And those individuals back then, does anyone know how much they gave up per week? They gave up a week's salary, which is far more than a pizza or the bag as they're showing here. That's why the word sacrificial is put in there. And in turn, that kept the missions funded, it kept it alive, and the missionaries never came home. And so praise God for that. So as we close today, let's just bow our heads in prayer. And dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for all your blessings. We thank you for those that have accepted the call to be missionaries. We know the struggles that they go through. We think of Paul and everything that he went through to spread the gospel. And we're so grateful that you've given these people the desire. And we just ask that you give them the strength, give them encouragement. May we be the Barnabases for them and for those around us. Because as we've learned, we're all missionaries, whether we go far or if we just stay here. Because every person we talk to, everyone we meet, everyone we work with is a mission field. And we just ask that you strengthen our faith, strengthen our relationship with you. And if given the chance, let us be a word of encouragement to those around us. And let us proclaim your good news, as the Great Commission says. Let's spread that throughout the world and within our neighborhoods. And we just thank you for all the missionaries out there. And we just thank you for your love and mercy you have for us. This is our prayer. Amen. I invite you to stand for closing hymn number 370.